nearly 60 years ago, when I was a freshman at Boston State College, I developed a stutter. It wasn't as bad as, Joe Biden. The bad part about it was a wet stutter. You know what I mean? It was a wet stutter. I would sputter and poor people around me I'd shower on them. Anyway, in our class, we had to read out our compositions. And in one day I read out mine and it was just awful. I just pictured the girl in front of me going like this. Maybe she didn't. And people, cringing. So I got down to the cafeteria and there was a fellow there who was in the class. Don was his name. He was a graduate of Framingham High, hockey player in the GBL league, I think they called it then, and a good guy. And anyway, we're having lunch. And I said something like, oh, sorry I made such a mess of that, whatever it was. And he said, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that. I thought it was well written. I thought what you said was well written. Well, as they say in the old novels, I had to get up, excuse myself, and go into the men's room and shed what used to be called unmanly tears, because that moved me so much. That was so gratuitously generous. And to the point that Framingham has got a warm place in my heart still. So we're going to begin today. I'm going to begin today with just this one, with a palate cleanser. It's meant to cleanse our palate of all the terrible things we're living around, and really of, unfortunately, the nasty things I'm going to have to talk about. And I'll return at the end to a matching scene. This is you probably have all seen or heard the play Our Town, Thornton Wilder's wonderful play. You know what it is. There's a stage manager who introduces people, and it's the turn of the century in Grover's Corner, New Hampshire, made, I think, modeled after Peterborough. And we just get sort of the archetype of human experience: childhood, love, marriage, family, and then the stage manager says, and you know what comes next. Anyway, it was last done on Broadway with Paul Newman as the stage manager, who sets up scenes and narrates them. And it's the story of the Webbs and the Gibbs who lived next door, and the Webb girl falls in love with the Gibbs boy. It was made into a movie in 1940 with a wonderful Aaron Copland background music. I couldn't recommend it more with an astonishingly young William Holden. I don't think he was 25, as George, and a radiant and moving Martha Scott as Emily. You won't watch it without crying. Anyway, there's this one moment toward the end, Act 3, where the stage manager is sort of walking around the town, and he's a country guy, so it has I'm going to do kind of a twang. Over there's some Civil War iron flags on their graves. New Hampshire boys had a notion the Union ought to be kept together, though they'd never seen more than 50 miles of it themselves. All they knew was the name, friends: the United States of America. The United States of America. And they went and died about it. Two statements that are equally valid. The sun rises in the east. Donald Trump was not fit to be president of the United States. Those are just veridical statements. And I'm going to talk about, through a little keyhole, how the media, how people in my business didn't help the public see Trump for what he was. So I'm not going to make any great theories of Trumpism, and I'm going to talk about things I know. But I do begin with this this grave because, of course, it reminds me of when Trump was in Europe. for the 100th anniversary of the battles of Belleau Wood, Meuse-Argonne, no, not Argonne, but Chateau Thierry, and for the end of World War I. He did not go to the grave site, did not go to the cemetery at Belleau Wood, near Belleau Wood. I've been there. It's touchingly beautiful. Rows after row of wooden but beautifully maintained, perfectly painted white crosses and stars of David, garlanded when we saw it, it was in summer, by luscious red roses. Of all the grave sites, I've been to them, the German, the English, the French, and so on. The Americans is the most, it just makes you proud to see that we honor our dead. Anyway, Trump didn't go. And the other leaders all managed to go, and they made up stories. He didn't want, and then somebody said he didn't want to get the rain on his hairdo. All they knew, friends, was the name, the United States of America, and they went and died about it. So we come from a country with this heritage that elected that man president. And I'm going to talk about three things: how it was that my business contributed to this. I'm going to do it under three headings: mad, bad, and dumb. I'm going to say that Trump was, quote, mad, bad, and dumb. Ignorant is what I mean. And I'm going to talk about them under those heads, and how we in the media didn't much talk about those things at all. Well, let's start with dumb. I mean ignorant. I hate that word dumb. God. But dumb does fit the case. Ignorant. In the 2016 campaign, Trump said about Iraq, we should have gone in and taken the oil. Now that was a statement of such staggering historical ignorance as to disqualify him immediately. It'd be like a man in a room of clocks who can't tell the time. Trump couldn't tell the time. He spoke about Iraq in a nakedly predatory way that even the arch statesmen of the era of European imperialism wouldn't have spoken of. They would have said, well, we're going to civilize the heathen, and we're going to, bring them the benefits of French civilization and all that. Can't. Trump said we should have taken the oil. It was stunning ignorance. The headline should have said, President doesn't know the time, doesn't know what time it is. He's just completely leave out the 21st century. He's out of the 20th century. He's in some predatory Middle Ages, a time of barbarism. But no, we should have taken the oil. That gestures to another category, a bad man, the way a bad man would think. Well, we in the media didn't make much of it. We didn't make much of the statement that he made, I think in August of 2016. It came out that he had said, someone said, we have all these nuclear weapons. And he said, why do we have them? Why do we have them if we can't use them? Or something like that. Now that should have been disqualifying. Immediately, sorry, you can't run for president. That's disqualifying ignorance and dangerous. Now, to their credit, over 100 former Republican defense officials and defense intellectuals wrote a warning to the American public, saying electing this man would be a threat to national security, and pointing to this ignorance about nuclear weapons as an example. But where was the headline saying 100 former Republicans say this man is too dangerous? It was mentioned. I mentioned it. But what are we talking about? We were talking about Hillary's emails, or we were talking about his tweets, or we were talking, there was always the shiny object. And we lost sight of the crucial thing, this disqualifying ignorance. And of course, during his presidency, I mean, to me, the worst moment was when he was with Putin in Helsinki. Remember that? And he was asked, somebody asked him about, and that was when he, of course, took Putin's part. He appeased Putin. He kissed Putin's ring on the question of interfering in our elections. Again, that should have been disqualifying. There should have been an impeachment right then. You're working for Russia. Get out. No. But this came in a question and answer, this particular moment of ignorance. And the reporter said, what about, aren't you worried about the tradition of Western liberalism under attack by Russian propaganda? And Trump said, well, yeah, there are a lot of liberals out there in California. That's true. And I'm sure that Mr. Putin thinks they're just as silly as I do. And, you know, those liberals, you can, in other words, the Western liberal tradition, that's one of the basic pieces of vocabulary of the Cold War, during which Donald Trump had come to manhood, grown up and educated. It's one of the basic terms, Western liberalism, communist totalitarianism. He thought it meant West Coast liberalism. He was that ignorant. So did we stop the presses? Did we say, no, we didn't. And the reason is, in the media, you can't say the word stupid about anybody. You can't say the word ignorant about anybody. Why? Because, of course, everybody says these media people, you know, they're just these snobbish liberals who think they know it all. And, you know, we gotta respect other people, but you shouldn't respect ignorance. You shouldn't put a crib around it and say, well, we're not gonna deal with it because after all, we'd have to say that's stupid. No one did. People said the president said this, and experts believe, instead of saying the president said a singularly stupid thing. No, you can't use that word. And I don't like stupid, ignorant. We're all ignorant of much, right? But we're not running for president. We're supposed to know the time. We're supposed to know the side we're on. That's kind of built into being president. He didn't know. He didn't have an idea. So inhibition about that, we just never able to say adequate things about that. All right, let's talk about, that's dumb, bad. He's a bad man, morally. General Kelly said he is the worst human being I've ever met. General Kelly, now he met a lot of, as a general in the Marine Corps, you can be sure he met a lot of tough characters. Worst human being he ever met. When he went to Pearl Harbor with General Kelly, he turned to General Kelly and he said, now what happened here after all? What was it that happened here at Pearl Harbor? Think of that. Disqualifying ignorance, callous. But we had plenty of warning about it in 216. We had at least 20 women come forward and very credibly describe being assaulted at one level or another by this lecherous man. And, you know, the president said, I could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any votes. Well, he did go out on Fifth Avenue, if one of these women is right, and rape somebody. Bergdorf Goodman, the store where this woman says she was raped by him, not just, you know, a kiss in passing, but a rape, is on Fifth Avenue. So he went out and raped somebody on Fifth Avenue. That was in the campaign. Who cares? Well, we're going to care about that because that's a defamation suit, and the woman has evidence, DNA evidence to show this, that will show she was raped by this man. Now, what did we also know in the campaign? That we heard about a little bit, but it was there, and we can't talk about that. Well, there was the deposition from his first wife on their divorce, and it was withdrawn. But before it was withdrawn, it was released, and the New Yorker, at least to its credit, summarized it. And what did Ivana Trump say? She said that she had told him about a doctor who could restore his hair. As we know, hair is the main preoccupation the man has. So he went to this doctor, and it was a painful experience. You know, he had to pull out, and pluck in, and all the rest. And he came home and he was furious at Ivana for recommending this guy. And according to her deposition, he grabbed her hair, pulled out some of her hair, and raped her. Man should be in jail. That's a beast. So we knew he was a lecher. And not lecher in any, playboy, but just, you can't even describe it. We also knew he was cruel. I mean, at those rallies, take that. In the old days, they would have taken him out on a stretcher. Take him out on a stretcher. You should, the headline should have been, President is sadistic. President has a cruel turn of mind, or candidate Trump. It wasn't that. It was the president said this and that. And by the way, there was an incident. No. The main subject should have been his cruelty, his manifestation of sadism, and this was, there was, making fun of the reporter who had some kind of palsy, some sort of Parkinson's disease or something, and actually mocking that. That should have been the headline. We all should have talked about nothing other than that, because that's the man that would be in the office. That's the character. In the media, we don't talk about right and wrong. That's the other thing. There's no talk of morals in the media. Who are we to say what's right or wrong? Wait a minute. I can say it's wrong to molest to one woman. I can say it's wrong to mock a man with Parkinson's disease. I can say that's viciously wrong. I can say about the Gold Star family, this is disqualifyingly cruel. You don't belong in a, they wouldn't even, should let even you take a tour of the White House. You're such an unsavory character. But no, we don't use moral language. You can't say he's a bad man. And yet that's one of the categories we all use in our lives, isn't it? We say of somebody, that's a bad character, or I'm leery of that person. There's a streak of cruelty there that just, we talk about that, and yet you can't say that in the media. We don't talk morals. And the result was we elected a lecher and a sadist. And that's just the surface of it. And because we didn't understand that character was the central part of what a presidential campaign is about. Finally, we come to, dumb, bad, mad. You look up this thing called malignant narcissistic personality disorder, quite a mouthful. Kellyanne Conway's husband, George, who was a strong anti-Trumper, began early on to tweet out the 12 signs of this disorder. And Trump met everyone: grandiosity, lack of empathy, cruel impulses, denial of reality. Every single box he checked, every box, malignant personality disorder. And when you read about it, it said there, hey, people with this disorder, they deny reality, and then when reality comes crashing in on them, they react with tremendous rage and violence. In other words, it would have been predictive of how he would have reacted to his defeat. Unable to accept it, he thrust the nation into a frenzy and provoked a riot, an attack on the Capitol. All of that would have been in the literature. And some of it was in a book very brave book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, 37 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. This was bold and brave. This came out in 2017. And it was bold and brave because psychiatrists are under a ban called the Goldwater Rule, as some of you probably know, stemming from 1964, when some were just too glib in saying Barry Goldwater was nuts or crazy or whatever. And Goldwater sued a publication that had quoted psychiatrists saying that, and actually won a judgment. So the American Psychiatric Society said, you cannot, it's a violation of our canon of ethics to comment on public figures unless, one, you've had them as a patient, and unless they have volunteered, so you can have them as a patient, and unless they have voluntarily said you can be public about it. So two insuperable hurdles. So most psychiatrists were mum, but these psychiatrists, my God, there are 37 of them here, were all available to be interviewed by people in our business. And yet we didn't want, again, you can't use morals. No, who are we to say what's right or wrong? You can't talk about ignorance because people might think you're an elitist. And why can't you talk about someone being, quote, mad meaning, right, just loosely? Because who are we to talk about? We can't talk about the president like that. No, we don't know. He's not. We can't have a psychiatrist on who'd say that because, that would, so the result is the vocabulary that we need to understand this man, we were deprived of by people in my business because of these huge inhibitions around asserting that someone is ignorant, which should be disqualifying, asserting that someone is a bad character, and with, in other words, is disqualifying, and saying somebody is disturbed. Media can't. I know it. I've tried to do this, and I've been slapped down. Saying, "Who are you to say that? How dare you?" And it's only in the last part of the campaign that this became clear to me. The New York Times, in their editorial endorsing Biden, referred to the president, quote unquote, as a personal degenerate. And I thought, of course, if you heard about somebody who had been accused of molestation by a score of women, who lied all the time, who relished cruelty, just couldn't have enough cruelty, pushed their heads down when you put them in the cab, and all that stuff. That's a degenerate. and they said a personal degenerate. And I thought, where was that headline? The Times only barely used the word liar in the headline, because again, not for us to say. And then the Washington Post, also in a piece in the after the election, actually referred to this is in a news piece, his emotional fragility. And I said, where was that? That's the mad part of it. Why didn't we hear more about it? Why can't character, which the founders said was everything depended on it. Everything depends on character. We know that in our personal lives. We know people that we count on, and we count on them for love and for affection, and so, but also just basically for what we would call character. And when people don't have it, or there are bad characters. Literature is full of con men and people like him. Bad characters, bad men, immoral, amoral. But there it was, emotional fragility, and it had not been. We were just mum about it. And so the very terms that were most relevant to understanding the pathology of Trump, the president, bad, mad, and dumb. Nope. Can't talk about those things in the media, which makes the media seem pretty beside the point in terms of deciding the main things. The presidents have to have good character. Obviously, they have to have good character. They have to know things. They have to have knowledge, a capacity to learn. They have to know what century they're in, just the basics. What century you're in? We're not demanding too much. And they shouldn't be emotionally disturbed. They shouldn't be able to be just called emotionally fragile. That's sad to be emotionally fragile, and most of us are. I certainly am. But I'm not president. And And this man was, and we said, meta, nothing, and let everybody down. So
Sorry
I
to
said,
interrupt, Jack. We're getting some people who are asking how this impacts the current administration and, what we can look forward to, since we're all sort of exhausted having lived through all of this.
well, I think, first of all, I think Joe Biden is in essence as different a character in terms of character understood as personality with a little muscle on it. His whole character is built around suffering, empathy, and resilience. Trump, not resilient, incapacity to have empathy, a great person for making other people suffer. He doesn't seem to have any inwardness at all. So they couldn't be more different. So the character is just basically entirely different. And there's a providence in it, I think, that a man with this background, with this much loss and grief in his life, should come to us just when so many families are suffering loss and grief. And it matters that he feels for them. It matters that he will reach out to them. And so in that sense, I see him as the remedy. Leave out the policies. Those are important, but it's the man. He's going to model for our children the things we want for them: to be empathic, to be respectful of people, to be, a decent human being in a way that Trump. What parent could say, "Oh, I want you to grow up to be like that guy"? Well, maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene said that to her kids. I don't know. So I see, people say in elections, it's, the people are choosing a replica or a remedy in the new president. He's the remedy. But I said that I would end with a story on the other side of things. This pickup on the graveyard thing. I recently edited a book about the Morgenthau family. This great family that ambassador to Turkey, secretary of the Treasury, 40-year DA of New York, 3 generations of Morgenthau's. It's a great biography, fabulous stories. Anyway, Bob Morgenthau, who just died a couple of years ago at 97, was a lieutenant on a destroyer in the war, and they were off North Africa. And the captain was a racist, and the quote mess boys, forgive me, that's what they were called, 2 black guys, wanted to learn how to use the guns in case they had to defend the ship. And the captain said, "I don't want those blankety blanks to do that." But when the captain would be away and they'd be out of port or something, Morgenthau would show them how to use the guns, how to man the guns. So anyway, German planes swoop down, attack this ship, the Lansdale. It's sinking. Men overboard. Everybody piles overboard. Morgenthau is about to quit the bridge when he looks down and he sees these 2 black guys, one of them dragging his bleeding leg, crawling over to the guns and strapping themselves into the guns. And from the water, the men looking, the ship is starting to sink. They see these guys manning the guns, and they shoot down 2 planes. Morgenthau crawled back, and he has to practically pull them off the guns. We got to get off this ship before, and they get into the water. Thank God it was the Mediterranean. They didn't get hypothermia because they had to swim in it for hours and hours. And this one guy, he said he was a sharecropper's son from South, didn't have much of an education, dragged his leg behind him all his life. What did he do that for? The United States of America, and they went and died about it. We come from people like that, and we have trashed that with Trump. So I want to end with that image of these heroic men. And what did America do for them? They couldn't even vote. They were honoring the idea of America. 2 Nazi planes. This is, we are surrounded by giants. And yesterday, as it happened, tended to be the 77th anniversary of the sinking of the SS Dorchester cargo ship off Greenland. And it was, there were 900 soldiers on board. They were carrying soldiers, and it was hit with a torpedo and sinking. And there were 4 padres, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, I guess 2 Protestant. And the men were running out of life jackets. The padres took off their life jackets, gave it to the men, and calmed them down. And then there were some men who couldn't get off the ship. And survivors said the last thing they saw was these 4 men, George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Poling, and John Washington. These 4 men, these 4 padres, these 4 men of God, linking arms and singing hymns and praying with the men. 77 years ago, yesterday, the 4, I forget what they're called, the 4 martyrs. When last seen, they were standing to be there on the deck, leading the men in prayer and song. Well, that's our people. That's who we are. And I think in the next some years, I hope we can get back to that. Not to people dying in war, but to the decency, the heroism. And of course, we see it in the hospitals today, these nurses, these doctors, the people that work in the grocery stores, taking our chance, all of the people who contribute. And so we're surrounded, I think, in that sense, by models to emulate. But let's hear from, I don't mean to go on at length about my lachrymose reminiscences.
We got a question for you in the chat that says there's so many challenges for Biden, but which do you think will be the biggest?
Well, I mean, everybody says it, and everybody's right. He's got to get this pandemic under control. He's got to get these things, these shots in people's arms. And I'm just a little. Anthony Fauci is a national treasure, but I'm just a little, without knowing anything about it. But some epidemiologists now are saying just do 1 shot and and you get so many more people, right? You can double the amount of people like that. And 1 shot gives you 60%. And then we can catch up with the others. And the British are doing that. But Fauci said, oh no, that's not science. But sometimes you've got to take a chance. This may be one of those moments. And the FDA has said, this came up when they were talking about it. They turned it down. They said, we don't have any science on that. If you wait more than 28 days, we don't know what the effect is going to be. The British aren't being held back by that. It could double the amount of people who could get some. And of course, 60%, the flu vaccine, what is that? 40% protection? Or in other words, we live with that all the time. And I really think he's got to shake. I hope he says to Fauci, can we take a chance? I know the science, but the British are doing it and they're not crazy. And we've got this huge crisis. My guess is they're going to have to go in that direction. When we have Dr. Michael Osterholm at the University of Minnesota, who's on Biden's committee, saying it's time to do that. Twice as many people, instead of 100 million, we get 200 million. That's, and we make a great stride toward herd immunity. So I suspect that may be in the offing.
We've got 2 sort of related questions for you. What are Biden's chances for Republican support for his legislative agenda? And then in a related, do you think that Biden will be able to bridge the gap between Democrats and Republicans?
No, no, no. I don't think so. I think what we have, you see, and it's evolved, but we haven't recognized it. We have a parliamentary system of government now. You know, in Parliament, labor members never vote with conservatives. It's considered, you know, you're called on the carpet, just as the Republicans are calling Liz Cheney on the carpet for voting with the Democrats to impeach Trump. That's how parliamentary systems work. It's party rule. That's what we have. That's what's evolved. No, there's no, and he doesn't need them. He doesn't need them, and he can't be held up by them when they do their beads, you know, they hold pearl clutching and people don't care about bipartisanship. And anyway, that belongs to a vanished era. We have a de facto parliamentary system where the main thing is party unity. You govern as a party. That's how the Republicans govern under Trump. And now the Democrats, at least governing in the right direction in terms of equity and dealing with national problems, are going to govern that way too. Now it means that some things are just not going to happen. You're not going to get student loan. The Republicans don't go along. It has to be, that's subject to filibuster, I think. I'm not sure. You're not going to get immigration reform. God, because that's subject to filibuster. So, and he can only do this reconciliation twice a year. So he can do it with this emergency, this stimulus, you know, COVID thing, and then he can do it on the big $1 trillion, $2 trillion coming up infrastructure. Now that's the one that's going to take us in the direction of the Green New Deal and put thousands and thousands of Americans to work. The effect of this, of course, is going to be what's called the Biden boom. We are going to have growth of 4 and possibly 5% in an election year, which is great news for the Democrats. And folks, the Republicans have to be kept out of power. They can't come back unless they recant. Because imagine, consider this. Suppose Kevin McCarthy had been the speaker just earlier in January. And the issue had come up, you know, are we going to turn these, you know, throw down throw the people's vote out? Would he have done it? I think in a heartbeat. They would take us into an authoritarian system in a heartbeat. They can't come back. The Democrats have to demonize them day and night by telling the truth about them, that they're a quasi-fascist cult party with some decent people. Susan Collins, God bless Mitt Romney, what a statesman. But those people are in the wrong party. I wouldn't be surprised if they either go independent or they wouldn't become Democrats, but I wouldn't be surprised if Romney and someone like Adam Kinzinger in the House. But the point is, you can talk about him in those terms. The rest of them, they can't come back. If they come back, if they get the House in 2022, then the election in 2024, he's speaker, this man McCarthy, who's a man of profound shallowness, he's speaker. Is he going to throw out the election? You bet your life he would. You bet, or what? You bet your democracy he would.
Got
Anyway.
another question for you, Jack.
Yeah.
We are, in addition to, of course, the impact that Biden and Kamala Harris have had, who do you see? We've got some pretty momentous additions to Biden's cabinet. You know, the first Latino head of Homeland Security, first potentially Native Secretary of the Interior, first openly gay secretary. So who do you see is poised to make a big impact within his cabinet?
I have a strange feeling, without thinking this through much, that we're going to hear a lot from Pete Buttigieg, because transportation is going to be crucial to the infrastructure bill. It's going to be all about roads and bridges, but also about broadband and in other words, infrastructure. And I think we're going to hear a lot about him, and he is so brilliant. And so I think he's going to emerge just because of the nature of the way the thing is going. And I think we're going to hear something with Marty Walsh. Rare. The current labor secretary of the Trump one Justice Scalia's son. He was an anti-labor man. Now we got a guy that actually been a labor man, a labor this doesn't happen it hasn't happened in my lifetime. First of all, that a man had actually done manual work as he did. But second of all, a man who'd been a union leader. That's what we need. We need organized service workers, organized hospital workers. He's going to make that easier. I think Marty Walsh is going to make a big contribution.
All right, got a question in the chat for you about your thoughts on the role of Kamala Harris under the current administration.
Well, I mean, I think she's the president in waiting, and let's hope it's, a long time. But the actuarial tables are what they are for Joe Biden. And he has said at one point that he would be a transitional president. He even mentioned being a president for one term. He hasn't repeated that. But she will run for national office and for the presidency. And I think she's just a tremendous political talent. You could see that in those debates. And just a decent woman. I mean, you can just tell her warmth and her humor, I just think she's very charismatic, tremendously, in every sense, tremendously attractive candidate. I mean, she's just got panache, stylish person. And I think she's going to captivate. I hope, I expect she will. Of course, the Republicans will hit her day and night. They're not electable at the presidential level anymore. I mean, I just don't think, but they can try to screw things up and they can catch that Congress. And if they do, as I say, we're taking a chance with our democracy with these people. QAnon, the QAnon Republicans. That's what they are now. They've embraced this woman.
Got a question for you about as we go green, how can Biden offer areas that will lose employment in fossil fuel industries a route to decent jobs in their home areas?
He's got to do it. It's already happening because of the nature of the economy, right? I mean, there's a West Texas, look, we say oil. It's also one of the leading, windmill places anywhere because of it's at the end of the plains there. They get all that wind. So I heard an interview with a mayor from out there, and he said, we're a big oil place, but we're also we have more windmills here than any place. And so the economy has already started to change. And Biden is talking about, vocational training to get people trained up to put in these facilities, these windmills and so on, retrofitting homes. That is a huge, I've read that can put hundreds of thousands of people to work tomorrow. And it could be done, through a federal grant. And so in other words, our leaky houses I live in a house built in the 60s. It just leaks all it's terrible. Imagine if we did that. He's going to put electric charging stations all around the country to welcome in that new era. So the point is, he's pushing on an open door. Green energy is already here. Even the big oil companies recognize that and are trying to get in out of the fossil fuel and into the energy business. So, I mean, there's going to be resistance. I heard an interview with the mayor of Gillette, Wyoming, which has the huge, open pit mining out there, coal. And this, I think it was a woman, she said, the handwriting has been on the wall. We're not happy about it, but people are understanding they've got to shift. And what we're waiting for is, can somebody see that we're out here in this barren place? It's a great place to put windmills and generate. And that's the kind of place Biden wants to build these sorts of facilities. So he's pushing on an open door. The economy is already, Elon Musk, nobody owns his cars. The company is worth more than General Motors. Why? Because smart people recognize that's the future. Electric cars are the future. It's an open door. And I think we'll be able to get jobs for people. And with Marty Walsh, That's going to be the emphasis of it. The other emphasis is going to be equity. Biden talks about this centrally. He owes his political survival to African-American voters, no question about it. All of us owe a debt to them for electing him and getting Trump out. And he said, I'm going to remember that. And he has said, equity is going to be at the side of everything, including this green energy, meaning we're going to do stuff in cities, meaning we're going to do, look after small businesses. There's going to be a strong element of minority participation in the Green New Deal, or in the Biden's version of it. And Biden is making race and what's due to African Americans in this country, and we all owe them for saving us from Trump. He's going to, everything that happens is going to happen with one eye on paying back, beginning to pay back what we all owe to these women. Well, not women, but men and women. But 97% of African American women voted for Biden. They made him. They saved him in South Carolina, and he's paying back by putting race right at the center. And the Republicans are already saying, oh boy, you're favoring one race. They'll play the race card. They'll bang it away for all it's worth. And it may make them some votes. But Biden seems undaunted by it, and I'm delighted.
Got time for one more question for you here. What additional thoughts / can you give us a summary of what your ideas for the prospects for the Biden administration are?
Well, I think, as I say, I think we're going to be talking about an economic boom to rival what we saw in the 60s. Because consider all the pent up demand, right? How many restaurants have you gone to in the last year? When finally we get this pandemic, people are going to spend. And Biden is already injecting trillions into the economy. And it needs it, but it also, there's a political calculation. The Democrats are going to run in 2022 on, listen, it's nearly 5% growth. And unlike other kinds of growth, which is for most Americans just a spectator sport, this one is working for people in the middle class and point to the evidence. This one is working for African Americans and point to the evidence and motivate people to vote. So if he can get that economy imagine 4% growth. That unemployment rate would just come crashing down, people going back to work, all this money in the economy. And he's got to do that to hold onto the House. If the Republicans take the House, democracy is at risk. They showed it. They were ready to go down to throw out the election to honor their cult leader. Well, there'll be another cult leader, Josh Hawley or one of these god-awful people. And they'll be ready to throw the election to him. They've got to be kept out. And the one rampart against that is a booming economy. And I really, so that's my big hope for him, that he gets the economy booming so much that the Democrats can say, oh, good times are here again. And, Trump deserves, someone suggested they should call the shot the Trump. And then people who had resistance to it on ideological grounds would get it. Biden has said he deserves credit for speeding up this vaccine. And, so Republicans can take some credit for that. But I think it's too dangerous to allow them to come back to power. They have to be, by democratic means, by beating them at the polls, they have to be kept from power until it's a new party, or until Mitt Romney or Susan Collins, Adam Kinzinger, people like that who you'd look at. I mean, I'd vote for Romney tomorrow. He's a statesman. Those people need to come to the fore and create a new party. But meanwhile, what about the crazy people out there who seem to be wedded to crazy people like this Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump, who's all for her too. God help us. Hey.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your thoughts, Jack. I think we're just about out of time.
Good.
Thank you.